It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that hurts your chest. Mom stopped cooking, stopped talking, stopped paying bills. Every night, she'd sigh and say, "You're old enough to handle yourself, Nora." Soon, Aunt Loretta began visiting, whispering with her behind doors. Even my cousin Paul grinned like he knew a secret. I didn't realize it then, but they were already pushing me out. And when Mom finally said, "Don't bother returning home," I thought my world had ended. But that night, as I walked away, my story had just begun. Hi, I'm Nora, and this is the story of how being kicked out of my own home led to something no one saw coming. If you think family betrayal hurts, wait till you hear what happened next. Make sure you stay till the end, subscribe, and tell us in the comment what this story teaches you. I remember the day I came back home, suitcase in one hand, hope in the other. The world outside had already chewed me up. Layoffs, rent overdue, and friends too busy to notice. But when I reached my mother's door, I still believed home would heal me. It didn't. Mom stood in the doorway, wearing her house robe, lips pressed thin. "You're back," she said flatly, as if I'd been gone for an hour, not 3 years. I smiled weakly, trying to hug her, but she shifted away to pour herself coffee. "You can stay for a while," she added. Those words, "for a while," carried an expiration date I didn't yet understand. At first, it was subtle. Meals grew smaller. She'd cook for herself, leaving me to fend off hunger with crackers. The warmth that used to fill our kitchen had turned clinical. She no longer asked about my day, or if I'd eaten, or if I'd found a new job. She scrolled endlessly on her phone, pretending not to hear me. I started noticing Aunt Loretta visiting more often. Perfume first, judgment second. "It's not healthy to have grown children still living at home," Aunt Loretta said once, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. Mom didn't defend me. She just nodded. Soon, things got strange. The Wi-Fi stopped working, then the cable, then one afternoon, the electricity flickered off completely. I asked her about the bills, and she just shrugged. "Maybe it's time you learned how to live on your own," she said, eyes never meeting mine. That night, I sat in darkness, surrounded by childhood memories that now felt foreign. My once safe haven was turning into a silent eviction. I tried to hold on to grace, cleaning the kitchen, helping with groceries, pretending not to notice the chill in her voice. But every act of kindness was met with indifference. "You don't have to do that," she'd mutter. "You're not staying forever." The words stung each time. Aunt Loretta's visits grew longer, her smiles sharper. One evening, as I walked past the living room, I heard her whisper, "She's getting too comfortable. Don't let her drain you, Mary." And my mother's soft reply, "I know, she'll get the message soon." That night, I lay in my old bed, staring at the ceiling fan that no longer turned, listening to the faint sound of laughter downstairs, laughter that used to include me. I realized home wasn't home anymore. It was a place I was being trained to leave. Then came the quiet shift. Mom began locking her bedroom door at night, keeping her groceries in separate bags labeled with her name. She even replaced the shared detergent with a tiny one she said was just enough for one. Every gesture screamed the same thing: "You don't belong here anymore." But I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I wanted to understand why. One afternoon, as I cleaned the kitchen, I found an envelope on the counter. My name wasn't on it, but curiosity won. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, a list written in Mom's neat handwriting. Electricity, cancel after Thursday. Internet, remove device access. Fridge lock next week. My stomach dropped. It wasn't neglect, it was a plan. Aunt Loretta's car pulled up again that evening, headlights cutting through the blinds. I peeked outside. She handed Mom something, a key, I think. They spoke quietly, looking around as if guarding a secret. I backed away, heart pounding. Something was happening, and I wasn't supposed to know. That night, while washing my face, I caught my reflection in the mirror, tired,
unrecognizable, and quietly breaking. I whispered, "Why doesn't she want me here?" But the question vanished in the cold silence. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "We'll talk in the morning. Don't make breakfast." I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the wind rattle the window, realizing I was more of a guest than a daughter now. The key element I'd ignored for weeks was now undeniable. My mother's love wasn't fading naturally, it was being replaced by something calculated, something rehearsed. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw 2 plates, one for Mom, one for Aunt Loretta, not 3. My spot at the table was empty. That was my answer. As I turned to leave, I heard Aunt Loretta say quietly, "Once she's out, Paul can move in by next week." And Mom's reply, calm and certain, "Good, she's had enough comfort for one lifetime."
The whispers started before dawn. Muffled voices carried through the thin walls, my mother's low tone, Aunt Loretta's sharper one cutting through like a knife. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my breath. The door creaked slightly, and I could make out my cousin Paul's lazy drawl joining them. That was new. Paul hadn't visited in years, not since his last business idea ended with borrowed money and broken promises. I crept closer to the door, my heart thudding as I caught fragments of their conversation. "She needs to move out. It's been months. You're not helping her by letting her stay here rent-free." "I know, but she's my daughter," Mom said, voice trembling between guilt and exhaustion. Paul laughed quietly. "Don't worry, Aunt Mary. Once she's gone, I'll move in. I can help with the bills, maybe even fix the place up." "She'll get the message soon," Mom murmured. "Then stop cooking for her. Make things uncomfortable. It's the only way she'll leave on her own." Something inside me broke. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that the coldness, the silence, the flickering lights weren't accidents. They were tactics, a coordinated plan to push me out like unwanted furniture. I stepped back, the floorboard creaking beneath me. The whispering stopped. For a moment, the house held its breath. I pretended to yawn loudly and walked toward the bathroom, hoping they'd think I hadn't heard. But the damage was already done. That evening, Paul strutted in like the house already belonged to him. He tossed his jacket on the couch and winked at me. "You still here, Nora?" he smirked. I said nothing. The air was too thick with unspoken truths. My mother avoided eye contact, fussing over the teapot she hadn't even turned on. Aunt Loretta sat smugly, scrolling through her phone like a queen who just signed a decree. Over dinner, Mom pushed her plate aside and cleared her throat. "Nora, maybe it's time you think about what's next. You can't stay here forever." "I was planning to leave once I found a job," I replied carefully. Paul chuckled. "You? Find a job that quick? Not in this economy." Aunt Loretta laughed under her breath. Mom didn't correct him. She didn't say a word. That was my breaking point. I excused myself, went to my room, and began packing in silence. Every item I folded carried a weight. The sweater she knitted when I got my first job, the photo of us laughing in the garden before things soured, the little ceramic mug I painted for her last Mother's Day. None of it felt real anymore. It was all part of a story that had ended long before I noticed. At 4 a.m., I wheeled my small suitcase past their doors. I didn't bother writing a note. What could I even say? That I loved them despite it all? That their betrayal had carved something hollow inside me? Outside, the world was still sleeping. The streetlights glowed faintly, and for the first time in months, I breathed without feeling trapped. As I reached the gate, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Take care of yourself. You'll thank me one day." I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen, realizing she believed this cruelty was somehow love. The cold morning air bit at my skin as I whispered to myself, "You'll regret this, Mom." Then, the faint sound of laughter drifted from the house, Paul's voice echoing through the walls that once held my childhood dreams. That was when I decided I would never come back, not even if they begged me to. It was raining the next morning, the kind of steady drizzle that made everything feel slower, heavier. My entire life was packed into one worn suitcase, and I had $43 left to my name. I ended up in a roadside diner off Route 18, the kind with flickering neon lights and the faint smell of burnt coffee. I sat in a corner booth, staring at a chipped mug while the waitress refilled it for the third time. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, tired, damp, but strangely calm. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was because, for the first time, nobody was whispering about me. Next to the cash register sat a small cardboard sign. Tonight's jackpot, $1 billion. I laughed under my breath, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who's already lost everything. I pulled a crumpled $5 bill from my wallet. "One ticket," I said to the cashier. "Powerball," he asked. "Sure, why not?" That night, I slept in a cheap motel room, the kind where the walls hum from someone else's TV next door. I left the ticket on the bedside table, thinking I'd throw it away in the morning. But fate has a strange sense of timing. The next day, as I stirred my instant coffee, the TV in the lobby caught my attention. The local news anchor's voice cracked with excitement. "Breaking news! We have a winner! The $1 billion ticket was sold right here in Fairfield County." I froze. The world around me blurred. The receptionist gasping, the sound of someone dropping a spoon, the hum of the vending machine. My heartbeat drowned it all out. I pulled out the ticket from my pocket, the paper slightly damp from my palm. The numbers lined up, one by one. All of them. I reread them 3 times, lips trembling. The woman next to me whispered, "Oh my God, are you okay?" I think, my voice cracked. "I think it's me." In that moment, something inside me shifted. Not a scream, not a jump of joy, just silence. The kind of silence that feels like power being born. I walked out of that motel room with a suitcase, a $1 billion ticket, and a new kind of calm burning through me. The pain, the humiliation, the whispers, they all faded into background noise. As I passed a mirror near the elevator, I caught my reflection again. My hair was a mess, my eyes red from sleepless nights, but behind them there was something new. Fire. That night, as I lay on the motel bed, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed once, twice, then 10 times. Missed calls. Mom. Mom. Aunt Loretta. Cousin Paul. And then a text. "Nora, please come home. It was all a misunderstanding. We were just testing you. Please answer. We love you." I stared at the screen, the corners of my mouth lifting into the faintest smile. The same house that kicked me out was now begging for me to return. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt untouchable. By noon the next day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. It started with one call from Mom, then another, then Aunt Loretta, then Paul. Before long, the screen was lit up like a Christmas tree. Names I hadn't seen in years flashing one after another, all suddenly desperate to talk. At first, I watched in silence. Each ring echoed like a confession. I didn't need to answer. Their voicemails told me everything. "Sweetheart, we were only testing you," Mom said, her voice dripping with a tenderness I hadn't heard since childhood. "We just wanted to make sure you could stand on your own 2 feet." Aunt Loretta followed with her usual syrupy charm. "Nora, darling, don't be mad. You know how families are. We only wanted what's best for you. And by the way, your mother hasn't slept all night worrying." Then Paul's message, short, awkward, and full of fake guilt. "Hey, cuz, I didn't mean to take your room or anything. It was just, Mom's idea. We're cool, right?" I sat back on the bed of that cheap motel, watching the messages roll in. My once empty inbox now overflowed with affection that felt colder than the rain outside. Then came the ones that made me laugh. Cousins I barely remembered. Neighbors who once looked away when I passed.
Even Uncle Dean, the man who forgot my birthday for 12 years, suddenly remembered I existed. "We've always been so proud of you, Nora. I told your mom you'd make it one day. God's timing is perfect, sweetheart." Perfect timing indeed, $1 billion worth of divine inspiration. I didn't reply. Not one word. Instead, I poured myself a cup of stale motel coffee and scrolled through the lies like they were bedtime stories. Each message revealed more than it hid. Their guilt, their greed, their sudden love wrapped neatly in hypocrisy. But beneath the amusement, a new emotion stirred, something sharper than anger. Clarity. They hadn't changed. They were only reacting to what they thought I had become. A week ago, I was a burden. Now I was a miracle. The irony was delicious. Later that evening, Mom's tone changed. Her messages grew longer, more desperate. "You're my daughter, Nora. No matter what happened, you belong here with your family." Then, "People are starting to talk. Don't make this ugly, please." There it was, the shift from guilt to control. Old habits die hard. I powered off my phone, letting the screen fade to black. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a thin streak of sunlight broke through the clouds. Faint, but steady. They thought they were calling the same Nora. But that version of me, she was gone. The woman holding that billion-dollar ticket had a new kind of power, one they could never manipulate again. And I was only just beginning to understand how to use it.
6 months later, I drove down the same cracked street I once walked barefoot with tears in my eyes. The house at the end of the lane looked smaller now, stripped of the pride it once wore. Paint peeled off the walls, weeds grew tall around the porch, and the laughter that used to echo through the windows had been replaced by silence. I stepped out of the car slowly, heels clicking on the pavement. My reflection in the tinted window barely resembled the woman who once begged for warmth inside that house. My hair was sleek, my clothes tailored, and the scent of expensive perfume lingered in the air like quiet defiance. I wasn't here to flaunt, just to finish a chapter that once refused to end. The front door creaked open before I even knocked. Mom stood there, thinner than I remembered, her eyes red from nights of crying or regret. I couldn't tell which. Behind her, Aunt Loretta hovered nervously, clutching her purse as if afraid I might take it from her. Paul was slouched on the couch, unshaven, his once cocky grin replaced by quiet shame. "Nora?" Mom's voice cracked. "You look different." "I should," I said softly. "You told me to grow up." The air thickened. Aunt Loretta forced a trembling smile. "We didn't mean what we said, sweetheart. Things just got out of hand. We thought you'd understand it was a family misunderstanding." I glanced around the room. The power was out again. Ironic, considering how they once cut the lights to drive me away. Bills lay scattered on the counter. A foreclosure notice peeked from under a pile of unopened mail. Paul stood up awkwardly. "Hey, cuz, you look amazing. I heard about the win. That's wild, huh? Maybe we could talk about helping Mom out a little. She's been through a lot." There it was, the real reason they called, the reason they remembered me. Not love, not guilt, just desperation dressed in politeness. Mom reached for my hand. "Please, Nora, we made mistakes, but we're still family. You can't turn your back on us now." Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they used to work. But I wasn't the same woman who once begged for a plate of food and a kind word. I was the woman who survived their silence. I met her eyes and smiled gently. "I'm not here for revenge, Mom. I just wanted to see if you were okay." Tears welled in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But sympathy and trust aren't twins. One can exist long after the other dies. Aunt Loretta broke the tension. "You've been well, dear. Maybe we could all start over. You could even move back home until you settle." I laughed quietly. Settle. I think I'm finally settled. Silence. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. As I turned to leave, Paul muttered something under his breath. Must be nice being lucky. I stopped at the door and looked back.
Luck had nothing to do with it, Paul. Losing everything gave me the courage to win. Mom called after me, her voice trembling. "Wait, where are you going?" I smiled. Home. But this time, home was not a place. It was peace. As my car rolled away, I caught one last glimpse of them standing in the doorway. 3 people who once had everything they needed to love me and chose not to. Now they watched the woman they pushed away drive off with everything they ever wanted. And for the first time, I felt free.
The next morning, I returned one last time, not to stay, but to close the circle. The sun was low, washing the streets in gold, and the breeze carried the faint scent of rain. The same road that once felt endless now seemed small beneath my tires. Mom was on the porch, robe tied loosely, eyes hollow but hopeful. Aunt Loretta stood beside her, whispering nervously. Paul lingered by the steps, avoiding my gaze. Shame carved deep into his posture. They were waiting, maybe for forgiveness, maybe for a miracle. I handed Mom a small white envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it, expecting more than what it held, a modest check, just enough to save the house from foreclosure, nothing more. "This will clear the debts," I said softly. "The rest, you'll have to rebuild on your own." Her lips parted, confusion flickering across her face. "Nora, I don't understand. You have so much now. Why not stay? We can start fresh." Aunt Loretta's voice followed, sweet but brittle. "You don't have to punish us forever, dear. We were just trying to teach you something." I looked at them, the people who taught me pain in the name of love, and felt an odd calm. There was no anger left, no need for vengeance, only clarity. "You told me not to come home," I said quietly, meeting my mother's eyes. I listened, and it saved my life. The words hung in the air like a verdict. No shouting followed, no tears for me, just silence, heavy and final. I turned, heels clicking against the wooden porch, and walked back to the car. Mom called my name once, her voice breaking mid-syllable. I didn't turn around. Some chapters are meant to end without an echo. As I drove away, city lights blurred into a river of gold and red. The radio played softly, the anchor's voice calm and distant. The mystery billionaire who claimed the record-breaking lottery prize has yet to reveal their identity. I smiled faintly, turning the volume down. The world didn't need to know who I was. For the first time, I was free. From validation, from pain, from needing to be loved by the wrong people. And as the skyline faded behind me, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's outgrowing the version of yourself that ever needed to. Sometimes life doesn't give you closure with fireworks. It gives you peace in silence. Nora didn't need applause, revenge, or recognition. She needed freedom, and she found it the moment she stopped asking for love from those who only offered conditions. Her story isn't about luck. It's about transformation, how pain can become power when you decide your worth isn't up for debate. So if you've ever been told you're not enough, remember Nora. They said she'd fail without them. She walked away and found everything. Because sometimes the richest thing you can ever become is unreachable.